you saw, but the actual right now, the reports of child abuse are down, which is not a good thing. Like, it sounds like a good thing, but it's not.
Oh, are you recording the meeting?
I just did for a second so that I can do a screenshot of it about, the University Stars interviewing us, but I'm just doing it for a second just so I can get a picture.
Oh, no, it's okay, because I was going to record it, but if you're recording it, I think I have to record it. Is it okay if I record it?
Oh, yeah, you can record it. Can you? I don't know if you can, not being the host.
From permission from the meeting host.
Let's see, is it asking me? Well, I'll record it and I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I read that report and it got me thinking about the local organizations here in San Marcos and how are they handling the abuse cases now that no one can report, or now that reports are going down and people are stuck at home. So then just trying to learn what they're emphasizing now that they the number one people they rely on aren't there to help them.
So what we're trying to do, first of all, so are you familiar with CASA at all and what we do?
Not too much.
Okay, so we get involved after the child has been removed from their home. The decision about whether abuse or neglect is happening has already been made, so we don't have anything to do with that. We get appointed to children by the judge who are overseeing the case. So right now, what our emphasis is to really make sure that the children that we are already appointed to are not getting lost in all of this. So we're making sure that we're checking in on their foster home. We're checking in on, are they getting visits with their parents? How are they getting visits with their parents? Are they still getting access to therapy and tutoring that they need? So we're really making sure that these kids are still getting what they need while they're in substitute care over all of this. The second thing that we're doing is that we're trying really hard to prepare for what's going to happen when all of this is over, and we are anticipating an increase of abuse cases being reported and coming in. So we're trying really hard to recruit and train more volunteers so that we have them ready to go as soon as these cases come open. We're also just, I don't know if you're aware, but this is Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month, April is. So we're also just trying to re-emphasize that it's not the case in all states, but in Texas, everyone is a mandated reporter. So that means that if you suspect that a child is being abused or neglected, it is your legal responsibility to report that to authorities. In some states, you don't have to report it. But in Texas, if it is found out later that a child was being abused or neglected and you knew about it and did not report it, you could be held legally responsible for not reporting that abuse. So we can't rely on teachers right now. Usually we do just kind of assume that they're going to report it, or that medical personnel are going to report, or law enforcement. But especially during April, I like to make sure that everyone knows that if you live in Texas, you are legally required to report suspected child abuse. And right now, without our teachers being able to intervene, or even neighbors, because kids aren't going to their friends' houses, it's really up to us to be diligent as community members to make sure that we're keeping our best eye out as possible. And if you do suspect child abuse, to make sure that you report that.
So in the cases that y'all are working on, are some of you still required to conduct visits in person?
So as a CASA volunteer, we are required once a month visitation with the children. We can't do that right now. So what we've been doing are things like this, using Zoom or FaceTime to check in with the kids. But no, a lot of visits have been canceled. And that's not just with us, that's even with their parents, with their siblings. The kids are having a lot of visits canceled, and that's slowing things down. So there are children who are on a path to become adopted, but that required a certain number of in-person visitations with their parents first to make sure that their relationship was going to be a safe one. And those visits have been canceled, so those adoptions are being stalled. Another problem that we're seeing is really a lot of strain on foster parents. There are foster parents who took children in with the expectation that they would be going to school full time, but now the foster parents are having to become teachers. A lot of them had full-time jobs, and I don't know if you're aware, but a foster child cannot just be babysat by anyone. There are rules and regulations as to who can watch a foster child if the foster parent is not available. And so right now we have foster parents who are having to struggle with, do I go to work and leave the kids with someone who's not approved by CPS, or do I stay home and watch my foster children and lose my job? So we have foster parents who are struggling. We have foster parents who are saying that usually they would take in more children, but right now, because of all of this and the extra work that it's taking to be a foster parent right now, that they cannot accept children. Unfortunately, we have a lot of children who are about to turn 18 and age out of the system. And we have a lot of things that we like to have in place for children when they turn 18. So do they have their driver's license? Do they have a checking account opened? And things like that right now, they can't just walk into a bank and learn how to open a checking account. There's no driver's ed classes going on right now. So a lot of those services that we usually depend on for those children who are going to turn 18 and age out of the system, right now, those services aren't being offered. So our challenge is going to be, when this is all over, to get all these kids caught back up to where they need to be.
So then, if children are less likely to speak out and they're not really being seen by community members, and teachers also aren't reporting because they're not meeting with teachers, how do you plan on reaching those kids that are just kind of stuck in between, not speaking out because that's not something that they feel comfortable doing, or they just don't do, and they don't have anyone to watch out for them? How do you all plan on reaching those people or those kids?
Unfortunately, right now, that is something that keeps all of us who are in this industry up at night. We're just, we're thinking about those kids who are at home, and usually they get to escape to school for a couple hours, or they go to their friends' houses, but there's probably so much abuse going on right now, and we just don't know about it. And that's really hard to think about. I was talking to a teacher the other day, and she was talking about her elementary school students who are raising basically their younger elementary school students because their parents are at work, and they don't have anyone to help them. And again, in that case, it's not the parent's fault, but that's even with a loving parent who's trying to decide work or stay home. But there are other parents out there that they just don't care. They're just not home. They don't watch their kids. The other problem is there are parents out there right now who probably would not be abusive parents, but the stress of everything that's going on right now, they don't know how to deal with that in a healthy way, so they are taking it out on their kids. So we worry about those scenarios too, where parents who usually would be a safe home are currently not a safe home for the children. So we just have to hope that at some point someone sees it, or like I said, when this is all lifted, we're trying to be really prepared to have enough volunteers available for those kids when they do come out of all of this.
So I noticed that there's also there's a bigger statewide like CASA program, and then there's some for specific regions. How does that work?
So there is a national CASA program, and there is a Texas CASA program. And they basically give us our minimum standards, like what we have. When I mentioned that we have to visit the kids once a month in person, that's a standard that national and Texas CASA give us. those programs, so National and Texas CASA, do not actually work with children or volunteers. They support programs like ours. So CASA of Central Texas, our program, is the local one, and we cover all of Hays County. So here in San Marcos, Buda, Kyle, across 35, we cover all of Caldwell County. So that's going to be Lockhart and Luling. We cover all of Guadalupe County, so Seguin, all the way basically to San Antonio with Schertz and Selma and Cibolo. And then we cover all of Comal County. So that's like New Braunfels, Canyon Lake, all the way out to Bulverde and Spring Branch. So our program covers basically the 4 counties between San Antonio and Austin. San Antonio has its own CASA program, and Travis County, Austin, has its own CASA program. The way that it works is whichever county a child is living in at the time that they are removed, it is that county's responsibility to handle that case. And it is the CASA program that covers that county that they're going to go to for a volunteer. So since we cover 4 counties, if a child is removed from their home and at the time they were living in Hays, Caldwell, Comal, or Guadalupe County, the judge will come to our program for a CASA volunteer. If the child is removed and they were currently living in Austin and Travis County, they would go to the Travis County CASA program for a volunteer. So we're split up just to really make sure that we are focusing on children who are in our local community. And that way we can guarantee that a local community member is matched up with a local child.
So everyone who works there is a volunteer?
So we have, I'd have to look it up, but we have approximately 20 staff members and about 250 volunteers. So our staff members are here to support the volunteers. But really, it is the volunteers who get appointed to the children and who are the ones who are meeting with the kids, talking to their doctors, their therapists. Our staff members are here so that as a volunteer, if they run into questions or need emotional support, they can come to us and say, hey, I have to go do a visit. It's my first one ever. I'm really nervous about it. And we can go with them on their first visit. We can go with them on their second, third, and fourth if they want to. But usually, eventually, our volunteers feel comfortable enough to be going and doing visits on their own. But they might run into a question about, like right now with everything that's happening, how do I do this? They can come to us and say, well, we have a Zoom account set up, or another volunteer was doing this. So our staff is really here to make sure we help the volunteers, but with 250 volunteers, we couldn't be doing what we're doing without them. So we really are a volunteer organization.
So then how are you all providing the guidelines for those volunteers now that they're restricted in the access they're able to have with the kids they're working with?
So for every 30 volunteers, one of those guidelines set up by National and Texas CASA, for every 30 volunteers that we have, we're required to have one person dedicated to those 30. They're called casework supervisors. We rarely have up to 30 volunteers per supervisor, but that's how many we're allowed to have. So, and it's not a random ratio. It is every volunteer knows their supervisor, and that's the person that they go to when they have questions. So right now, the role of the supervisors is really to be kind of coming up with ideas. How can our volunteers keep in touch with the children? They're paying attention to what other volunteers and other CASA programs are doing, and then helping their volunteers with that. We are staying in contact with our volunteers regularly through Zoom and social media. We have a private group for just our volunteers where they're sharing ideas of using FaceTime and things like that. The court hearings have been held online, so our volunteers can video conference into those and be part of those court hearings. But that's really why we are here again as an organization, is to make sure that to be giving those volunteers suggestions of how to keep up with your kids during all of this.
And you said there's guidelines online in the national organization's website?
I don't know that those would be online. It's more of like our program knows them. So to be a CASA program, you have to have that 30-to-1 ratio. You have to do an in-person visit once a month. We have guidelines too from National CASA, not just what the volunteers have to do, but what we have to do as far as what background checks have to be done before a volunteer can come in. what kind of training curriculum they have to go through to become a CASA volunteer. So I don't think those are online, but they're given to us as policies and procedures as a CASA organization.
So then, how do you all decide which cases still need face-to-face intervention?
So all of that, I would say all of them need face-to-face intervention. It's going to be up to the capabilities of the foster home and the volunteer, whether they're able to do it. But what I would say is that if face-to-face is not available for the CASA volunteer, it is still available for the CPS workers. And so CASA volunteers then would check in with the CPS workers and find out how did that visit go, what was discussed. So our volunteers don't just keep up with the children, they keep up with all of the adults who are involved. So they would be reaching out, you know, if they're still having communication like this with their therapist, then the CASA volunteer could reach out to the therapist and find out how did your therapy session go. So it's not just about visiting with the children. That's not our role anyways. Visiting with the child is an important piece of being a CASA volunteer and making sure, you know, that you know what's going on with the child. But there are other people that we always talk to too, like CPS workers, attorneys, therapists, teachers, doctors, and our volunteers are able to still reach out to those people during this time too. Again, it might not be face-to-face, but it could be through video conferencing or over the phone or email. But in addition to keeping up with the children, they're still keeping up with all of the adults, and they can get a lot of information that way too.
So really it's mostly the volunteers getting in contact with all the people they would typically meet with in person, but they're just doing it now online.
Right.
So it's not like they're not doing what they need to be doing, it's that they're just doing it differently.
And a lot of that isn't different anyways. Before all of this, our volunteers would regularly keep contact with the attorneys and CPS workers anyways, and that might be through the phone. Those aren't people that we necessarily have to make face-to-face contact with anyways. So that piece of it is still kind of running how it would before. It's really those in-person visits that we're missing with the kids right now.
So what is something you want people to know about these child abuse cases and then how they're not being reported now? Like, what is something that you want community members to be aware of?
I want community members to be aware that there is this program here in their community where they can get involved with these kids. I remember first hearing about CASA and hearing about child abuse and going to court and all of this and thinking, I'm not qualified to be involved with that program. But that's really the beauty of CASA, is that it's an opportunity for everyday people to get involved with these kids. You're not a CPS worker, you're not an attorney, you're not a foster home, you're not a therapist. All of their kids already have all of those services. What we really need are people who can just come in and unbiased go in and find out what's best for these kids. Talk to the kids, talk to their therapists, their doctors, their teachers, their foster placements. And then about once every 3 months, when the judge reviews the case, our volunteers go to court and say, Judge, I've talked to all of these people and here are my recommendations, what's best for these children. So we only serve about 50% of the children who are in CPS care, and that's because we just don't have enough volunteers. And we really believe that there are more than enough people out there who could become CASA volunteers and serve these children. They just don't even know that CASA exists, or they automatically assume that they're not qualified. But more than likely, the average person is qualified. We do all of the trainings, we do all of the background checks, and then like I said, we support our volunteers for every step of the way. So if you're sitting at home right now just worried about these kids, this is a really good time to go through the training and become a CASA volunteer, because like I said, we are anticipating an influx of children who are going to need CASA volunteers. And so right now, while you might not be able to be helping these kids who are at home, that are being abused, you can get ready to help them when you're able to. In a few months, when we can start doing face-to-face visits, you'll be ready to go. So I just want people to know that if you're worried about these kids, there is a way to get involved with them. Maybe not now, but there is a way that when all of this is over, that you can be ready to go and get appointed to one of these children.
So it could be a little confusing for someone to kind of, because there's the CPS, then there's the top Department of Family of Texas and Family Protection. So like there's all these different layers. How would you explain that to someone who isn't too familiar with this whole system?
Great question. So the way that I explain it is like a wheel, like a bicycle wheel with all these spokes. And CASA is at the center of it because CASA talks to everyone. We talk to CPS, which is the Department of Family and Protective Services. We talk to the attorneys. We talk to the teachers. We talk to the therapists. We talk to their foster placements. We talk to everyone who's involved, and then we get this information, and we're kind of the hub. And then we go to the judge and say, here's all the information that I've gathered from everyone in this circle that has any type of connection with the children. Here we are. So Child Protective Services, they're going to be responsible for the child while they're in CPS care. So they're the ones who monitor everything and make sure that the child's needs are being met. The child's attorney is going to argue and advocate for what the child wants, because that's the role of an attorney. And then you have your service providers like therapists and teachers, the ones who actually are providing something for the child, whether it be education, mental health needs, medical needs. CASA comes in and is kind of unbiased. We don't have to rely on the Texas Family Code like CPS does. We don't have to rely on advocating for what that child wants because we're an attorney and that's our job. We come in and look at everything and say, okay, I know the child wants to go home, but it's not in their best interest. Or we know that CPS has required this, but we feel that the child is doing fine without it. So we come in and all of us kind of gather around the judge anytime there's a hearing and the judge says, okay, CPS, what do you want me to know? Attorney, what do you want me to know? Foster placement, what do you want me to know? CASA, what do you want me to know? And we all provide any information that we can, and then it's up to the judge to make court orders based on what we tell them. And then those orders are in place until 3 months later, we'll have another court hearing. And this goes on for about a year.
So in reality, it is not like the children who aren't in school are being ignored. They are still something that you all are, not just your organization, but many organizations are still trying to reach, and they're trying to prepare for after all of this blows over.
Yeah, we're definitely, I know the good thing that's coming out of all of this is that we are all having to learn new ways to communicate with the children, to keep up with them, to find services, to make sure the services are provided. So even when we come out of all of this, there are going to be some new tools that we all have, CPS, CASA, attorneys, the judges. We're all going to come out of this with new tools that are going to benefit the children. So there might have been times before where a child was placed out of state and we couldn't figure out a way to get them to their own hearing. Well, now the judges have figured out how to video conference these kids in and make it convenient so that they can attend their own hearing even if they're not close by. There are services that maybe weren't provided before, but now like tutoring or counseling, that now maybe we can do them via video conferencing. So the good thing is that, yes, we're learning new tools that hopefully even after all of this, we'll be serving the children better because of it.
So then This is a lot of information for someone. It's not like even the local organizations that are here. So CASA, like at least the Central Texas version, they follow the national regulations, but then there's also local organizations in the area that focus on, so then who kind of gives the guidelines, the basis of here's what we're trying to do to react to the COVID-19, and these are the ways that we found are the best to still help the children. Who kind of, is that just the State Department that does that?
So the Texas Family Code is the initial where that's what defines what is abuse, what happens when there's suspected child abuse. So that's the Texas Family Code. But then now what we're having to do is watch the governor mostly, because it's varying state to state, these no contact orders. So we are following the governor's guidelines right now. So if the governor says that CPS workers are essential and they need to still do their visits, then they still do their visits. CASA volunteers are not considered essential right now, which is why we are doing everything via video conferencing or FaceTime, things like that. So I believe, at least as far as what we at CASA of Central Texas are doing, we're following the governor's guidelines as far as what contact we're allowed to make.
Because I know now that the governor is allowing trials and other things like that to be conducted during or through video chat now. They no longer have to go in person. So everything that is related to what a judge has to do, they have a lot of terminology that they released in the press release that I don't remember, and because I don't know what they mean. But they had those things are still being conducted just now online rather than going in person. So you're kind of always being aware of that.
Yes, and we are still, so anytime that there is a hearing done online that involves one of our children, it's usually done like this through a Zoom meeting. Our CASA volunteers are still participating in those hearings via Zoom, and so are their CPS workers and their attorneys. So there are fewer hearings if they weren't necessarily essential ones, but we are still holding hearing. There are courts still happening. It's still going on.
And is there anything else that I didn't ask that you'd like to add, or anything you thought I forgot or want to clarify?
Just that we need more CASA volunteers. Like I said, we're serving about 50% of the children, and we've hovered around that for years now. And so if someone is interested in becoming a CASA volunteer, don't let court, child abuse, those kind of words worry you. Like I said, we do all of the free training and we will support anyone. We just need people who are willing to talk to these kids, reach out to them, talk to the other adults in their lives, and then advocate for them. So.
And then anything else you want to add regarding like the COVID-19, how you're handling everything to kind of just
to keep these kids in your thoughts that they're going through a lot right now. It's stressful as adults, but it's even more stressful to be a child in an abusive home right now because they really have no outlet, nowhere to go. So just keep these these children in your thoughts. And if you do happen to see something, don't hesitate to report it.
And then do you have any questions for me or anything else that you want to ask me?
I don't think so. Just send it to me when it prints, and I'll share it on all of our social media and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get you published out there.
Oh, no, that's really scary.
No, that's great. And it gives us something else to put out there. And if you ever are doing something that involves child abuse or volunteering or anything, feel free to reach out to me if you need just like a third source for a third quote or something like that. Just let me know.
Okay, yeah, this is my first really big story that I'm trying to, or that I'm going to write about. So that's why it's scary, just because it's I've never really done a topic this serious before.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to do the best that I can with the information I have in the today.
Who else are you talking to?
So I've talked to someone that is in the Hayes Caldwell Women's Shelter.
Okay.
And the Greater San Marcos Youth Council.
Okay.
And then you from CASA, and also I've talked to someone with, let me just so I can get the actual title.
Look someone up too.
Tex Protects the Champions for Children, Safe Children. So I've talked to them, and then I think I got maybe CPS or the Department of Texas. I had something. I got an interview, but email responses.
Okay, because I was going to say I'm friends with a CPS worker out of Hayes County. If you want me to reach out to her and see if she'd be willing to be interviewed, because I know she's still working right now. Like she's doing visits and things. So I'll reach out to her. I don't know their level. So you'll learn this as a reporter. There are certain people within organizations who are allowed to talk to media. Like not everyone at CASA is allowed to just do an interview. There are certain people who are allowed to do it. So I'll ask her if she is allowed to be interviewed, or if not, does she know some who at her department would be the one for you to contact. But I'll reach out to her because I'm friends with her personally, but she also is a CPS worker on a lot of our cases.
That'd be really great. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
That's a really reported thing to do, of a contact. You have
I have a contact for you.
Yeah, that's something we always do. We have a meeting once a week, so we always talk about contacts. Who knows who and what areas do you know? And then also, you can't. There's certain people, like right now we're trying to do something about HEB, but we can't just talk to anyone who works in HEB because not everyone's allowed to talk to HEB.
Right.
So there are some things that I'm learning, but I really enjoy it. Like you said, it's really fun to learn about them now rather than when I'm actually in the field doing something.
Yeah. Well, see, and now you're my contact. We do it on this end of it too. Like, oh, well, I know a reporter at the University Star. Let me see if she wants to write about this kind of thing. So, yeah, you become a contact for us too, because I have like a media mailing list of everyone that I send my press releases out to. And so I keep track of, so-and-so runs every press release that I send and things like that. So we have the same kind of meetings on this side of who are our contacts. So
well, thank you so much for meeting with me and recording the meeting too for me. Yeah. If there's any other follow-up questions, is it all right if I email you?
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me, and it was really nice meeting you.
You too. Have a great Easter weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
And I will try and send you. I have never sent the recording, so I will try and send it to you. We'll see if that works.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.